Yeah, look, I can. Thanks, Greg. And look, thank you all for attending. I'm looking forward to having a chat about this whole issue of lender readiness and supporting people on their business growth journey. So for many of you here, you're in the agribusiness sector, as I have been for quite some time. So I'm a small to medium enterprise owner myself, and our company principally focuses on working with clients in both an advisory and an education role around business management as opposed to production. And so the idea behind the business management side of it is it's the critical element of expanding your business and also running a business efficiently and effectively. And it happens, the business best practice that we'll be touching on briefly is most important to becoming lender ready. So back to you, Greg.
Okay, thanks for that, Gordon. So how do we get started and consider how this Lender Ready program has come about? Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, I can. Greg, as you can see at the bottom, ourselves, Meat and Livestock Australia, AgForce and the Queensland Government, and there have been a number of other partners who have come and gone from this process, have been working together in a business management program, as I described a minute ago, to help people with the professional development that they require around better business management on a daily basis and business growth. So we've been running this program since 2015, and the advice that we received a year or so ago was lender readiness in a current changing lender environment is one of the kind of missing links, along with high level financial management, in running a business better. So the logical extension of this is, once we've created a lender ready program, which we have now, was to give people some insights, hence this webinar program, around the key elements of becoming lender ready. So we've developed this 3 or possibly 4 webinar series. The first one, which is today, is thinking through how you might access money to support operations and plans. It sounds simple, but there's a little degree of complexity there as well. Next week, Vern Ezzi from Curida will be joining us. And I've specifically asked Vern to come along because Curida is the Queensland Government arm that supports loan arrangements, which Vern will discuss in more detail. And we've been dealing with a range of the commercial lenders as well. So I'm going to start with Vern next week and talk about what their wants and needs are. Then the third webinar coming up in 2 weeks' time is with one of our clients. And we've been through a process with them over 6 months in putting together a fairly comprehensive lending proposal. We've run the gauntlet of the system. We've done a very interesting sort of process, and I'm going to ask Kim to talk through those experiences that we've had working with her and her personal perspective. And Greg, we may end up having a 4th webinar, but I guess we'll worry about that after we get the next couple of webinars under our belt.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one question that comes to my mind, Gordon, is how does the Lender Ready program fit with the work you're already doing?
It's a good question, Greg, and you'll see I've brought up an interesting little diagram there. And so from my perspective, the Lender Ready program fits well with the idea of growing a business. You'll see in the middle of that cycle 2 key elements. What a surprise, money. But it's also focused on, what do people actually want to get out of their business? Because this is actually part of the story. What's the long-term plan is actually going to have to be part of the story that they put in place when, I guess, proposing to a lender, whoever that lender might be, that there is a structured plan, there is a financially organised approach in implementing that plan, and that the business owners are showing the capability and capacity of managing their performance, refining their performance. So now I'm going through that cycle, monitoring performance, refining performance, and potentially, and this is part of what we deal with in our business management and business growth programs, is if you've got a really good business model, maybe there's merit in replicating that model. That being the case, business best practices around continuous improvement, and celebrating success. So these are some of the elements that fit in the business growth cycle that are very relevant to thinking around becoming lender ready. The other element, which I've just brought up here, is that generally speaking, if you're going to grow and expand your business, whether you're in the agri sector or elsewhere, money from somewhere somehow is often required. That being the case, and I guess I'm starting to repeat myself, and this will come up throughout this presentation, the questions often are, firstly, why are you doing what you're doing? What do you need to do? How's it all going to play out? And can you demonstrate that there's real profitability in what we're doing? And we add that fourth element, which Greg, you and I have talked about before, and is a key element of all our thinking with our clients in the professional development, education programs and advisory work, is what if it works or what if it doesn't? If you achieve success, it's a great feeling. On the other hand, if we don't achieve success, that's what lenders talk about in terms of risk. And so that's going to be one of the key elements that we'll be talking through in the Lender Ready program, planning and thinking about risk.
Yeah, exactly. And what about, you've talked about the extra funds and that are required to build on that business. Is it really focusing on those four aspects, or is there anything more that you can elaborate to that?
Well, it is to do with those four aspects, Greg, but at the same time, this kind of why, what, how, what if formula, which again sounds simple, if you look at that business growth cycle, which I have on the right there, you'll actually see that that fits within that framework. So the first thing is, what's best practice? So am I achieving best practice? What needs to be done? That's the blueprint. Then the implementation is the how. So really, strangely enough, business management, business building, going to a lender all fits within this, what appears to be simple, but in reality is somewhat complicated process.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's move on to getting the money.
Okay, Greg. So this next slide is about getting the money, but I'm going to do, I mean, people are listening to this and probably going, look, give us the game plan, mate. But what I really wanted to do is, I guess, get all of us to stand in the shoes of a producer, somebody else in the value chain who is a small business owner. And we've had the opportunity of working with a number of these business owners, and I've done it myself, in getting money from lenders. And I guess to give you an understanding of why we've created this program the way we have, and this is very important for everyone listening to go, how does this fit with what I'm thinking? The responses that we get are things like this. Working with a lender can sometimes be a moving target. Even worse, if I get asked questions I don't know the answer to, I feel like an idiot, or I probably feel like I have no idea what I'm actually doing. The next thing that they often ask is, this seems to be complicated. Is there any kind of checklist out there that can make my life easier when I'm figuring all of this out? Which often leads to the next question, which is, if this is as complicated as it's starting to appear, do I really have the time to spend doing this, going through this process, and particularly for something that's appears to be complicated? The other thing, which is point number 5, is I know I and a lot of business owners that I speak to, you sometimes feel somewhat confronted about talking to other people about your personal affairs. And there's no question when you're talking with lenders, they want to know the detail, which comes back to the element of risk. But the 6th point, which is why would you be doing all of this, is if I'm going to go to a range of lenders and work out what proposition they've got on the table, how do I know about assessing the deal, so to speak? So ultimately, it can be boiled down to these sorts of things. getting money from banks, or it could be pension funds or high net worth individuals, or it could be other family members, can be sometimes complicated and frustrating. And there's often a fair bit of paperwork involved. And frankly, if I'm on a property or even in my small business in the value chain, I would probably almost rather be doing where my expertise lies, rather than doing all the admin that fits. And then people say, look, mate, some of them say I'm keen to do it myself. Others of them go, where can I get help? That's where this all fits, Greg.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I know that as you indicated there, it's getting an understanding, and there's a lot of emotion, a lot of stress and things. So can you talk us through the frustrations that you've seen?
Sure.
Some of your clients.
Okay, look, I'm going to go a little bit further down the track, which is why did we come up with this industry program? And I guess one of the more strategic problems that people see is it's one more thing that I have to add to my suite of jobs to do. There's a great deal of complexity about what we're doing. If I have to do it, what is the most straightforward approach? And really, fundamentally, have I got all the paperwork that's required to get all of this done? Because if it's going to be a painful process, I need to know how it's all going to play out. So why do we create the program? The idea was to get someone to help walk an aspiring borrower through a process that works. It's probably no surprise by now that working in a group is something that we see great merit in doing, because we find if you're operating in a group, whether it be face-to-face or even online, you have the opportunity to bounce ideas off other people. So we've set this up as a group process to allow people to both work with ourselves as specialists and bounce ideas off their contemporaries. The idea behind it too is, if we look at those problems on the left-hand side, can we be supported in filling out a series of templates? And it's not quite as simple as a paint by the numbers approach, but if you've got a template or a system to work towards, then that simply makes life easier and gives people a degree of confidence that they may not have otherwise had. The other element behind all of this is, if you've got people like ourselves who've actually been down the path with clients, we have some insights by speaking with lenders, a range of lenders across banks, other institutions, high net worth individuals, and so on. You can actually quiz us about some of these points and get some clarity yourself. And fundamentally, what sits behind that is it helps build confidence. And I put a comment down there about advanced program booking in and that sort of thing. Greg, what I'm thinking after this webinar is that we might actually provide people with some details on how they can actually find out more about this program, assuming that they're interested.
Absolutely, and my eyes were drawn to that advanced program bookings. So can you give us some background on that particular program, and why is that?
Okay, so the idea behind the program is that it fills all those key points that have been raised above, Greg. And the idea behind this is there'll be some people who'll go, I need to jump into a face-to-face program because I feel much more comfortable doing that sort of thing. Other people will say, look, an online program is something that's easier for me to do because I'm operating in a far-flung area. Or the other thing that might happen is that both of us, let's say it's two partners or whatever else it is, need to be involved in something like a program like this, and yet we can't get away because we're both flat to the boards. That being the case, then we're trying to create something for everyone, Greg.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When we were sort of promoting the whole till today's session, we were talking about the 6 key principles, the golden rules, and the must-dos. I guess that's the heart of it all. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on the 6 key principles?
Yeah, I can do, Greg. And look, we did call them must-dos, we did call them golden rules, but it's one of those sort of things that you start thinking about it over time and go, look, I think I've got change that. So we've settled on the idea of key principles. So this particular set of principles is really based on this idea of an optimum result. So uniformly, as we've been dealing with a range of our clients, and clearly we look at this from the point of our own business, the optimum result, which I've got there on the screen, is really embodied in two things. Often people default to what's the interest rate, what's the repayments going to be. Nothing wrong with that. That's an excellent idea. But the other thing which is often unseen is what are the terms and conditions that might go with this loan arrangement? It might be around time. It might be interest only versus principal and interest. It might be what are some of the costs? What are the break costs if I have to get out of this? And furthermore, there may be some other things that sit behind us that we don't even know until people actually start digging into what their requirements are for their game plan going forward, which is that business growth cycle. So the key principles then sit around these 6 things. The first thing is understand the lending environment, because if you're going to think about rates and think about terms and conditions, we're going to ask you to sit in the lender or stand in the lender's shoes as well. So look at your needs and their needs. And that's where the whole idea of understanding comes in. It sounds complicated, but if you want the optimum result, you've got to be clear what you want and what a lender wants and find that sweet spot in the middle. By now, it's probably no surprise that we're talking around becoming clear about what you want, what you need, and there's clarity around the potential lender requirements, something that's going to give them confidence in you and your proposition. Also, by now, it's probably increasingly clear that there's going to be time, effort, and discipline that's required in putting your thoughts together to get this optimum result. And so this commitment and courage, because, certainly working with a number of clients, they get partway down this track and go, this is reasonably frustrating, particularly if they've got a lot on the place or they've got a lot going on in their business, but are saying, look, we're on a bit of time pressure to get a lending arrangement organised. The fourth key principle is understanding that you're in lenders' hands. At this point, I'd like to, observe something that I intended to do a bit earlier in the webinar. I've had the opportunity of working with a number of lenders over a period of time, and many of them are, well, most of the people, in fact, all the people that I've dealt with are committed to helping their customers. They're also constrained by what's going on in the lending marketplace and with their policies and so on. So while I put this that you're in the lender's hands, building a good relationship is quite important in going down this process. So that's really why principle number 5 is there, which is a structured and orderly approach to engaging with a lender, because this is a sales process. You're actually putting yourself to the lender as being a credible business owner, one who's got a good business idea, maybe a good proposition to acquire another property or some other infrastructure or equipment or whatever else that may be. But there's an extra element to this process, particularly in banks, which is that there are a group of people called credit, which we'll come to a bit further down the track. Effectively, it's quite difficult to build a relationship with many of those people because of a range of reasons which we'll come to in the program. But what we're setting you up to do is to build this relationship to get the best possible mutually beneficial result. The 6th principle is, if a deal is put on the table, what's the proposition? How does it fit my goals and aspirations? How does it fit the proposition that I've put forward? And there's a quantitative and qualitative effort which come back to the best rates and terms and conditions that I've just described. So it's always going to be about the money, but it's also going to be these quantitative elements, which may be something as simple as, do I believe I can get on with this lending institution? Do I believe that working with these managers and other personnel is going to be a mutually beneficial experience? So the answers or the application of these key principles is how we've built this self-help system around the Lender Ready program. And I'm aspiring to do at least some of that through this webinar program as well. Greg?
Okay, thanks for that. Now, obviously, we're talking about a lending environment, building relationships with your lender and things like that. So can you go through and summarise for our audience today and give them a picture of what's ahead for them?
Okay, well, I guess to look at what's ahead for them, we've got to apply ourselves to the past. And this is by no means comprehensive, because this is kind of a short webinar that's just jumping over or ranging over a raft of topics. This Lender Ready program came about at the time of the Banking Royal Commission, the same so-called Haynes Royal Commission, which led to a number of changes in the lending environment, and things had been changing prior to that. And so if there is an aspiring borrower out there, it's important that they understand that that led to a number of changes and adjustments to where things were before. So you might have an expectation that things were as they were 3 or 4 years ago. If you're going to get some cash from a lender, that may well not be the case anymore. So that's why this discipline that we're talking about is quite critical. The second thing that's happened is the COVID-19 experience. So I've spoken again to a number of lenders who have said, Gordon, as we think about our customer risk profile and the risk to our, let's say, our bank, we'd like to see how customers actually went through the COVID experience, because that's somewhat of a litmus test for how they might actually play out in a very risky environment. And currently, with the continuation of COVID, there is some thoughts floating around that the government this year, whatever that means, may ease off on these responsible lending requirements. I personally don't know what's ahead of us. There might be some in the audience who are in the lending profession, and I know there are, who may have some thoughts on how this is going to play out. But the reason why I've got what's next there is because we don't know what we don't know. That's why it's important to understand the lending environment. And so what does this mean for a business owner? It means we have responsibility ourselves to put all our thoughts together, to create the documentation and the material that's required to put ourselves forward as being a good risk. If you were sitting in one of our business management programs or our work with our clients right now, we talk about the idea of a CEO mindset. And people will say, mate, I'm not the CEO of Woolworths. No, but in fact, most of us, myself included, are the CEO of my business, and things operate in the way in which I make them operate. So that's where discipline and focus comes in. And everything we do is built around these ABDI 12 pillars of business best practice. And you can go on our website and have a look at them, because fundamentally we use those 12 pillars as a checklist for pretty much everything we do, and they underpin the lender readiness process and the Lender Ready program. Because fundamentally all the documents that you provide to a lender have to be something that you're comfortable with, and they must fit the current set of circumstances in the lending environment, and they must be something that you're prepared to be held accountable to. So that's it for that matter, Greg.
Thanks for that. And look, you know, I've honed in on the what's next and where your comments about the current lending environment for lenders. So can you give us a quick summary of what lenders really want and what do they need?
Sure, happy to do that, Greg. So there are really 4 things that lenders need: a clear plan of attack, a set of financials, and they need to think about risk. So the business plan is to tell your story. Again, we're back to the why, what, how, and what if. And so it depends on the size of loan that you're going for or what the deal is that you're going to put to a lender. But that business plan really needs to tell the story. It needs to be of where you are now and where you want to be. It also has to fit with and be in sync with your financials, because what a surprise, anyone who's been for a loan will know that there's a discussion around show us your past history, show us your current set of circumstances, and if you've got a grand plan for the future, show us your financial forecasts to show and demonstrate how that fits with your business plan. And then ideally, not ideally, definitely, depending on the size of the loan arrangements, a lender is going to say, demonstrate where the risk fits. What can go right? What can go wrong? What are you actually going to do to deal with the risk? And so this is, of course, production risk, as you would expect, because most of us deal with that on a daily basis. But it's also going to be business risk, unintended consequences, things like your personnel. And I've seen examples in recent times where there have been discussions about, well, show us your succession plan if you're an older person. So all of these things need to be embodied into a proposition. So the elements here that are sitting in front of us, a business plan, the financials, understanding and appreciating and demonstrating that you're addressing risk, all come into this proposition of the deal that needs to be put forward. So once again, that's where the time, effort, and discipline comes in to tell a story. Because fundamentally, what we're putting on the table is our credibility, which is one of the C's, 3 C's, which we won't go into right now, but they are key elements of character, capacity, and collateral. And they fit within this framework, which is where are you now? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? What's the risk? And what's the financial benefit over how long? So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of the key elements of what lenders want. And while that appears nice and simple and straightforward, by now it's probably fairly apparent that a fair bit of effort is required to pull it together, Greg.
Absolutely. I'm just conscious of time, and I want to leave enough time, Gordon, for questions and answers, which a few questions have already come in. But I realise that in our second webinar, which is next week, we'll be talking with one of the lenders directly. Can you give us a brief whiz over some of the key elements for engaging with those lenders?
Sure. And look, I really will whiz over this quite quickly, Greg. There are a range of lenders that I've already touched on. So we often think about banks, but we've also got to think about institutional investors and all sorts of other people. One of the other things to consider is that you might think, I will create a proposition and send it off to a range of potential funders, whatever that might mean. That's broadly speaking the case, but there will have to be some customization to meet, in particular, say, bank policies. There's a sequence of events that you'll go through, which is to, I guess, engage firstly with a manager, someone in that managerial setting. They will be supported by somebody who interprets it, and then the ultimate endpoint is back to credit. So data starts with you, it goes off to the manager, ends up in credit, and there's a whole feedback loop that goes from there. And what lenders will often ask is, we've got our system that is an individual lending system, and this information needs to go into that system. So give us comprehensive data, and you don't have to go overboard, but you need to actually understand the extent to which the data is required to provide them with all the information that's required. Otherwise, there'll be further and further clarification as you go. That's why building this manager relationship is quite critical. And I've brought up those 3 C's around character, capacity, and collateral, because ultimately that's what lenders are seeking to buy. They're seeking to buy you and others. And remember that you are probably going to be working with an accountant. You may well be working with an organisation like ourselves, or you may be going it alone. But fundamentally, they're buying your ability and the story that's being told. So we're back to this idea of, firstly, what do you want and need in terms of your business going forward? Secondly, can you put that into a business plan to articulate that clearly? Thirdly, can you give us all of the financials to demonstrate there will be a profit at the end of this? Can you go through those risks and articulate them? What funding do you need, why and how, and what's it going to be used for? And then go through this process of engaging and fine-tuning the information that's required, Greg. So that's about it, I think. Sure, Greg. I'm just going to explain these as they come up.
Yep.
And
Okay.
setting the scene is that Meat and Livestock Australia is a funder of this whole process. Our company is too, and we have those partners. So the first discussion was, and this was a little bit of pre-COVID-19, but it's equally applicable today. Some people feel comfortable with a face-to-face workshop. So therefore, like a 2-day workshop is a good way to start. We've had experience quite successfully in running a series of online self-complete modules. And the beauty of that process is that if you've met people in a face-to-face workshop, you feel far more happy about, say, an online coaching session, which often complements the self-complete module. So in other words, as a group, we get together and we do it online. And so there's kind of a package of face-to-face online work. And so I guess the poll is that of interest to you, or is it not? Or might it be of interest? So I'm interested in a bit of a straw poll of what people think of that idea. On the other hand, the conversation is in the post-COVID-19 environment, maybe there's an opportunity to do this whole thing online with a series of short, sharp information modules, some material delivered to you, where you sit there with some worksheets, look at the material that's provided on the screen, work through your worksheets, and then again, there's an online discussion session. Coaching may not be right because in my experience, it's an open discussion often between the group and ourselves, and that's where some of the real gold is, to help people decide whether or not that option is of interest to them. So Greg, the questions again are yes, no, or maybe. Are people interested in either or even both of those options? Okay, thanks, Greg. Well, I promised you that we kind of take a whistle stop through those 6 principles. So the final principle is, how do you think about assessing the proposition? Inevitably, people are going to think about interest rates. So this is kind of a little mental checklist for everybody here to think, these might be some of the things I'll need to consider. There's often an application fee, or maybe not. There are often valuation fees of, say, your property if you're in the agri sector, or maybe not. Loan servicing fees, renegotiation or break fees, and a range of other fee opportunities. And so essentially we have a great big spreadsheet where we put all of that in, and we make some assessments about what the ultimate financial position is going to be around that proposition. And that's the sort of thing that we'll share with you during this Lender Ready program. So you can actually objectively consider for yourself what would make the best lending proposition. But then these qualitative elements that I mentioned earlier might be the sorts of things of what sort of a loan arrangement and what sort of transition might be there be about the term, interest only, principal interest, whatever else it may be. I've touched on things like relationships with managers, relationship with the organisation. We probably haven't discussed other banking products which might make your life easier. And for example, there are a number of lenders who have actually resources such as hedging opportunities, or fixed interest rates and all of these sorts of things, or market research materials which might be of value to you. These all need to go into those sort of settings. There might be close proximity to an office, and there might be a range of other things as well. So Greg, that really summarizes those key elements, and that was a whistle-stop tour, but there's much more to it.
Yep.
And that's where people simply go, look, now I understand, and that's what our objective is.
Yep. Okay. Again, very conscious of time, and we're heading towards the back end of today's presentation. But can you quickly touch on some of the client experiences that, or summarise some of those? And I know we're going to be covering off on some of these in webinar 3.
Sure. This is a whistle-stop tour, and these are 2 real clients that we've worked with, and I just wanted to, I guess, make those listening understand about what we call the size-appropriate nature of your proposition, because some people might be panicking and going, holy smokes, there's a heap of work, which is true, but at the same time, it is this size-appropriate. So this particular client was after a loan of $1.5 million. They had been to one of our business management programs, so were pretty much the full bottle on everything I've been talking about here. We simply provided them with these templates We acted as a bit of a sounding board. We knew they were fairly good with admin and spreadsheeting, and they just did it all from there. I think I got 2 phone calls from them. They got their $1.5 million without too much fuss and bother. Had to run up and down the flagpole a few times, a short list of 2 banks, and were able to ultimately get the result that they wanted after a reasonable amount of effort, but not unduly frustrating. The client, which you'll be hearing from further down the track, was also involved in one of our business growth programs. We've been working on business growth plans for some time. There was an initial loan proposition that we did a few years ago. It was outsourced to another party, but we all felt that there was some fair degree of mystery in this whole process. So part of the thinking this time was around what's the deal. It was, if this is a bigger, more risky proposition, we probably need to engage with our lenders. And so there's been a joint effort between ourselves and the client. And fundamentally, we've obtained some money with a fairly exhaustive process. There's been a fair degree of frustration as it's gone, a fair degree of cost, but the result has been there. And there's been a significant amount of money saved as well, Greg. So I just want to show people that there is a size appropriate element to all of this. It all can be done, but if you've got a system, it makes life a whole lot easier.
And that moves us on to the table that you're just showing us right now, that some people might be thinking whether, is this program for me? You know, can you step us through the table that you're showing us now?
Sure. And look, Greg, none of this is rocket science, but I guess I regard myself, because I'm in the advisory business, you've got to do the right thing by your clients. And so this is just actually showing people that if you want to do it as a do-it-yourself exercise, it will work, no question about it. Just be prepared for the time and effort. Understand that there's going to be a fair degree of complexity and administration that's going to go into the process. I've experienced, interactions between business partners, wives, husbands, whatever else it may be, about the stress on them and going through all of this. And the thing that we often talk to people about in this process is, where should you be spending your time? Where is your time best spent? So that's why we've created this Lender Ready program. And so if you're thinking about something like this as being for you, it's important to go, it's a system, there's a logical sequence. Our job is to help you go down the pathway. As I said, I love the idea of a group process, whether it's face-to-face or online, because you get the sounding board of not only us, but other people involved. And I think one of the unseen benefits of something like this is it helps you stay on track. We find this with a lot of our work, that people get involved in the day-to-day affairs and go, oh, that's painful, I don't want to get back to it. But the thing is, it all takes time and effort, and demystifying. That's the other element of it too, Greg.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I noticed that you have developed a series of questions that people could probably ask themselves, and we are about to, or getting very close to, getting into our Q&A session. Can you take us through those posed questions for us? And don't forget, everyone, if you have a question, please just type it into the question panel. And when we get to that Q&A session, I'll be gladly to read that out anonymously. Okay, if you could.
Thanks, Greg.
Take us through that.
Yeah, sure. And look, I guess I like to go back to first principles, which is something that you're going to have to do if you're thinking about getting money anyway. So one of the very first questions to ask self is, when will I need this money? And that's to help you plan what you need to do when. Ideally, are you going to have to go to a lender? Can you go to family members? Do you want to get investors into your business? All of those sorts of things form part of question one, which is, when will I need it? Where's the money going to come from? Second question is probably not rocket science, but something you need to think about is, can you define your plans clearly? If I asked you a question specifically about where you want to be in 3 or 5 years from now, can you answer that? Do I have the skills? Do I have the information? Do I have the systems or the resources to create defined financing plans? Is the next step or the series of steps in this whole process clear? Then the other question is, do I really want to do this on my own? Where is my time best spent? And is there any merit in getting assistance? And Greg, I've just put myself in the shoes of some listeners who might be going, I'm on this webinar because I just wanted to find out what this bloke's talking about, get a bit of an update on the lending environment. That's great. I reckon I've got it all sorted. Or there might be people who are thinking, actually, I do need some cash in, say, 4 months or 6 months or whatever. What am I going to do? There might be some other people who are saying, I've got some fairly significant plans, maybe 6 to 12 months. I reckon I might be running out of time. How do I get started on the paperwork? So they're kind of me being an outsider looking in, Greg, and saying, maybe these are some things that people could think about, might want to think about.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. So I can see we're getting down to the tail end of the presentation. So where do you currently plan to start the first face-to-face programs?
Sure. Well, Greg, we intended to run our first program in Brisbane starting on the 28th and 29th, like a 2-day workshop. And one of the things that we'll be doing after this webinar is saying to people, are you interested in something like that? There are people from around Australia, and we've actually talked about Wagga and Hamilton as being 2 places where we might start a face-to-face based program. We intend to start the online program on the 18th of April. And so I guess that's a time horizon for people who are going, maybe this would be of use to me. That's a bit of thinking time. The question for people is, if I want to start now, because there might be somebody on this call who is saying, mate, it suddenly made me think I need to get going on this whole thing straight away. One of the things that we're going to send out for people who say, I do want to book into this program, is, I guess, a piece of material that will be very helpful for them to get started. It's a thing called, how do I do a 180-day plan? So this is actually a good strategic yet operational thing to start getting people clear on some of the things that I've talked about already. And Greg, the other thing too, just to put on the table, is if somebody out there is chewing their fingernails and says, mate, I really need to have a chat to someone about it, I'm happy to get on the phone and have a talk for, say, 15 minutes about what's going on. And if we can do anything to help, we can. So you've got my phone number there, you've got my email address there, all of which will come up a bit later, Greg.
Okay, wonderful. And that was one of the questions, whether when I did see your number come up, whether they could actually use that. So I'm assuming that anyone who's listening, or anyone at all who might have an urgency of getting started right here and now, that they can give you a call to be able to start that process off. Is that right?
Sure. And also, if someone's saying, and this happens all the time, saying to themselves, I need to have a chat to my husband, wife, partner, business partner, parents, kids, whatever it may be, can 2 or 3 of us get on the phone to you and just have a bit of a yarn about how this program might work? Equally happy to do that, Greg.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. Okay, looks like we're pretty much done and dusted, but if you just want to go through the disclaimer there, that'd be terrific.
Okay, this is one of those stock standard things that you see all the time. So the first thing, Lender Ready program is designed to help you figure out what you don't know, so that you can actually help the data and create the data and the documents required that I've described that meet your requirements. At the same time, once again, we do as everybody else does, which is to say, if you need specialist advice for your own circumstances, please do that.